Ladies and gentlemen, hello again and welcome back to Petroleum Economists 2020 LNG to Power Forum for the Asia Pacific region. I hope you enjoyed your lunch break and got some useful networking done. Our next two sessions focus on technology and infrastructure. And I remember nearly 20 years ago now when Kathleen Icebrenner was promoting the idea of floating regasification and storage at various conferences. She often attracted skepticism and occasionally I think it went as far as derision. But the idea did take hold, and over the last 15 years, FSRUs have transformed the LNG business and made it possible to open up new markets in a way that onshore terminals couldn't do. But there is still a place for the onshore terminal, and this session will be all about FSRUs versus onshore terminals, which is the best option. Moderator for this session will be Connell, LNG Infrastructure Manager at ExxonMobil. Perry, over to you.
Thank you, Alex. And thank you everybody for joining us today. It's a pleasure to be here and talk about LNG infrastructure solutions and to discuss the merits and compare the options that LNG customers have. So we've got a number of distinguished panelists here, which I'm going to introduce in a second. But I'm also going to mention to you that I've set up a poll. It's a little crude and cryptic. It's my first time trying, and I did it in about 5 minutes. So give it a shot. I've put a little example there of a 500 megawatt LNG to power solution in a country with no gas. Deep water is about 1 kilometer away. What kind of technical concept would you use? I gave you a couple to consider. We'll revisit it at the end. Hold your voting. Let these guys sway you one way or another. So let me introduce our distinguished panelists. So let's start talking about the classic onshore LNG regasification terminal, the backbone of customer side infrastructure. And we're privileged today to have from KOGAS, Mr. Beom-Seok Kim, who is KOGAS's Senior Manager of Plant Business Development. Welcome, Mr. Kim. Would you please give us a minute or two about yourself and KOGAS?
Hello, everyone. My name is Beom-Seok Kim. I'm working at Plant Development Business Team. Our team is developing LNG regasification terminal in overseas, usually. We consider all the types of terminals, onshore terminals, FSRU, FSJRU, and small-scale terminal also consider as per the client requirement. And also, if it included the power plant scope, we can do also. And KOGAS is currently operating 5 LNG terminals in Korea and 1 in Mexico, with total 74 LNG storage tank we have. Total send-out capacity of our domestic terminal is 134 million tons per annum. Recently, we built and started operation small-scale LNG terminal in Jeju that is 1 million tons per annum. So that's our brief introduction of our KOGAS and my job.
Thank you, Mr. Kim. Thank you. So as Alex pointed out, for the last 2 decades, the floating storage and regasification units, FSRUs, have grown to become a key enabler for new LNG markets. And today we're privileged to have from Höegh, Mr. Parth Jindal. Parth is Höegh's Asia's Managing Director, and welcome, Parth. Can you give us 2 minutes about yourself, Höegh, what you're up to?
Sure. Thanks, Perry. And yeah, before that, yeah, thanks, Petroleum Economists, to invite me to be part of this panel. Well, as you mentioned, Perry, I represent Höegh LNG in Asia Pacific. So based out of Singapore, I'm managing the business development activities and raising financing for some of the projects that we install in this part of the world. For those who don't know, Höegh LNG is a market leader in floating LNG infrastructure space. So we own and operate 10 FSRUs globally. Currently, we have 6 of those FSRUs operating as regas terminals. The beauty of FSRUs being that these can double up as LNG carriers while FSRUs or the terminals are under construction. So we have a number of other projects which are in development. So 4 of those FSRUs are currently trading as LNG carriers. So that's about Höegh. The company has been one of the pioneers in FSRU space. We have seen the market evolving when we, as Alex said, when this was being introduced in the market and we were approaching banks, and banks were like, sorry, what? FSRUs? Okay, you guys float, and okay, we are used to onshore terminals. But now FSRUs are just synonymous with LNG terminals. And we are looking at, in future, significant amount of developments in FSRUs beyond LNG only.
Fantastic. Thanks, Parth. I think in today's business environment, with COVID and kind of a global downturn, the flexibility, the dual purpose nature of an FSRU has a special place, trading as an LNG carrier as well as serving new markets. So fantastic. Our last introduction is in the more flexible and fungible space. So as LNG has grown more affordable, there's been an increasing demand for solutions that unlock even more flexibility and perhaps for more challenging markets. Gasfin is one of those companies that's meeting that call, and with their unique floating regasification units. So we're privileged today to have Roland Fisher joining us, Gasfin's founder. So welcome, Roland. Please tell us a few things about yourself and what Gasfin's up to.
Thanks for that, Perry, and thanks for the platform to Petroleum and Economist. So Gasfin has been looking to help smaller off-spec markets join the LNG value chain. Our history is in building the smaller LNG and cryogenic terminals as a EPC contractor, and also in designing smaller gas carriers. And we've taken that background to support what are seen as complicated or problematic projects, where the volumes are smaller or the destination is a little less familiar to the LNG players. I noticed in your introduction you said last, and in this case, least, rather than not least, because in the company of Höegh and KOGAS, clearly Gasfin is a small player, but we believe there's a role for engineering-led development. And as the LNG market reaches into places it hasn't been before, some of the larger scale approaches become a little less viable. And so that's how we pitch ourselves. Our primary activity at the moment is the development of a project for LNG import in Ghana. I'm sure we'll come back to that. That is a floating facility and is based on the separation of the regas in a floating barge and the storage in a existing LNG carrier. But we'll come back to the pros and cons of that, but that's where Gasfin plays. I look forward to the discussion. Excellent. Thanks, Roland. Great. So let's get a little bit more into the dialogue. So, a little bit about myself, LNG infrastructure manager. I meet with a lot of prospective LNG customers out there, just as you do as well, and many of the other folks who are joining us today. One thing I find is there are technical misconceptions that are quite common. And I find myself kind of reviewing that with customers. As ExxonMobil, we're generally technology agnostic when
with customers, we prefer the technology concept that makes the most sense, and sometimes that's not too complicated, and sometimes that's very complicated, and sometimes it's not always obvious which is which. I think that there's a lot of our companies have done a great job advertising. There's FSRUs, FSUs, FRUs, onshore terminals, but all of these have some common components. They all, every one of these concepts must receive LNG from an LNG carrier of some size. It may take hoses, arms, a jetty to do that, fenders. Something is required to do that. They have to be able to store the LNG. This could be done in onshore tanks. This can be done on tanks on the FSRU or FSU. There needs to be tanks involved. They have to be able to regasify the LNG. They have to be able to, and whatever this is, needs to be able to stay under control. Maybe not in one place. Maybe it's spinning around, but it needs to maintain station. And of course, the often overlooked piece is that gas is generated throughout the period, and many customers forget that part, and that seems to define so much about the design of a facility is what happens when the LNG is not flowing and gas is being generated. So it's those critical components that exist in each one of the concepts that you described. So, but I think that each of the technology concepts that you most represent, they have some very unique features in them that bring special value technically. We can speak technically because I think commercially you can also speak to other things, but technically, maybe you can each tell me a little bit about what your respective concepts really uniquely delivers. And if Mr. Kim, can I start with you and tell me, when you look at onshore terminals, what are those things that onshore terminals deliver that the others can't? It's truly unique.
Yes, there's many reasons to selection of the types, but KOGAS, we are the state-owned company. We established to supply gas with stable, without stopping. In order to keep that goal, KOGAS terminal have to be 100% reliability. So KOGAS client, our clients are power company, city gas, for the resident and industrial sector. So all the terminal types are onshore terminal. I think onshore terminals have some merits. The one thing is there is impacts expansion wise. We can increase the capacity, so without stopping, just adding some facilities and build more tanks, and in that way we can increase capacity, and we can easily adapt, install other facility like a truck loading facility and bunkering facility. We can install, and other thing is also you can utilize it as a like extracting hydrogen facility. Install that that hydrogen can be used to the cell power generation and for the transportation fuel. Then other thing is we also onshore terminal can be utilized as a cold energy for the cold storage area. You can provide cold heat. And other thing is 100% reliability. So in order to do that, you have enough storage capacity. So we have some redundancy equipment, and we also some major some equipment goes wrong. We can repair without stopping. And the onshore terminal is not affected by the weather, the storm or other things. We are not impacted. So the kind of merit is onshore terminal we have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kim. It sounds like reliability is a big part of what the onshore brings, as well as the ability to evolve as the market evolves and add infrastructure, expand. That reliability, perhaps, am I safe in saying, is that the most noteworthy component of reliability is probably just like the amount of storage, especially given the size of the Korean market? You're able to withstand periods when ships can't get there, cyclones, typhoons.
Yes. Yes, we have 74 storage tanks, so we can, without shipping, we can deliver supply LNG around 7 days to 30 days capacity we have. So
wow.
So yes, our country consumes a lot of LNGs, 30 million tons per annum we consume. So that we have to keep storage a lot of amount of LNGs.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's thank you for that, Mr. Kim. Parth, talking about an FSRU, what do you feel is kind of that real unique, those few unique features that set it apart?
Right. See, there are a number of positives, but if you just ask me to pick top three, what I would say is the speed to the market. So there have been projects which have been discussed for a while, and it could be that, okay, sudden change from onshore terminal to a you need it now. So, okay, you have sort of bridging solutions where FSRUs can fit in and be there producing in 6 months' time. So as long as you have a jetty available, we can bring in topside and we can have it delivered, the gas delivered in that much time. So that is absolutely critical. Second thing, which is a unique seller, is the dollar sign, which comes in various forms. First is the capital outlay. The capital outlay is significantly lower compared to onshore terminal because obviously a lot of capital is invested by the FSRU owners. And second, the overall capex requirement for an LNG terminal, FSRU-based LNG terminal, is significantly lower, probably 25–30% of some of the onshore terminals. So the capital outlay is significantly lower. Third is the flexibility provided by a solution. So for example, you can have an FSRU where you start with a 6-month startup time to say 5-year startup time or 3 years. And in case the timelines move, you can create FSRUs as LNG carriers. Or if you are looking at developing an onshore terminal and you contract FSRU on a long-term basis, and then you have expedited the onshore project, then you have a tail end of 2 years or 3 years on FSRUs, then you can just trade them. So you reduce your risk significantly as project sponsors. For the reliability aspect, FSRUs have proven to be very reliable. More so you are seeing increasing discussions about gas to power projects where you have either integrated LNG to power project or FSRUs feeding directly into power plants off the grid. But FSRUs sometimes with some onshore additional alternative fuel solutions can provide very high reliability. So what I would say is that the industry over the last 15 years has evolved to fill the shortcomings which were originally there in FSRUs. But now we have solutions which are as good as or even better than onshore terminals, I would say, at significantly shorter delivery times at much lower costs.
Okay, very good. Yeah. Thanks, Parth. So, Roly, the FRU concept or FRU system, what are the unique technical features there? What sets it apart?
Okay. I mean, I think this conversation, we focus on the technical for a moment. The obvious point is we separate storage from the regas. Now, that in itself is not an advantage per se, but it gives us quite a lot of flexibility in how we secure the storage and the regas. So in the current market, we are looking at very low cost for existing LNG carriers that are maybe too inefficient for service as vessels, but can provide us with a very low storage option for a new terminal. Equally, in the context of the new markets, we're looking at markets which may have very different or very unknown volumes. So when we look to the regas part, what we can do with a barge is have a rather more customized regas facility, such that we can operate at very efficient levels at low send out, or we can cope with the growth to a larger send out. So it's the optionality that comes with being able to specify the two parts of the LNG regas terminal activity, which has played very well into the use of a separate barge to a LNG carrier. And I think in a way this plays to a bigger theme, which is that one size and one approach doesn't work for all. So one of the most compelling facts I've taken away from my time in LNG and power was the cost of a missing kilowatt hour versus the cost of an available one. So people get obsessed about whether a kilowatt hour costs 10 cents or 20 cents or 30 cents. But actually I saw some very good analysis that to an economy, a missing kilowatt hour probably costs somewhere in the region of $2.50. And one of the roles of the FRU and of these solutions for different scales is to minimize the number of missing kilowatt hours. So for us, that's to bring gas to markets which don't have it, and to ensure that they have a reliable and cheap source of energy. And that is precisely the role we're playing in Ghana. It's a market where there is gas, but the reliability and the volumes were hard to manage. But in all these markets, finding the solution that fits the market is the aim. And so for us, any market below about 1 million or 2 million tons, we believe needs some special solution. And in many cases, it helps to be able to separate the regas from the storage. I'm not sure if that asks more question than it answers, but I hope that's a sort of good start.
Oh, well, I agree with you. I think what I kind of take from this is that they can accomplish all the same technical feats. There are nuances though. And especially as you get into the flexibility of the product that's offered, that's where things really differentiate. And you have, I think you have I love, Rolly, how you're talking about how an engineered solution that I think is both in the engineer of the technology with the commercial product that's being provided, so that so that all of the energy makes it there to the right folks. Versus perhaps an onshore terminal where you get all the reliability, but maybe it's a bit bigger, and the FSRU, which is maybe a quicker, faster speed to market with some flexibility and timing around it.
I think we shouldn't underestimate that we're in an evolving market. So if we take an onshore terminal, as I said, we've been involved in building onshore terminals for years. They typically have a very well understood underlying market. And to me, there's no reason why an onshore terminal isn't the end game for a lot of even the new markets. But the problem is to get the LNG flowing. And because we're in an evolution, we're missing a lot of component parts in the chain when we look at a new market, or we look at even just the growth of LNG generally. So we don't have a network of small LNG shipping. So it's very hard to start a new market based on small ships. We often, as I mentioned, don't have demand. We don't know our demand profiles going forward. So I'm hoping, and as we said, each of these solutions provides something slightly different. So I hope we don't see ourselves in silos. I think we're all in a sort of continuum. And all that we've done in the FRU, or as I say, to separate out the regas, is to create a little bit more optionality as you enter that sort of evolution, and hopefully be a bit more adaptable for what comes ahead. So we can, the advantage of floating infrastructure, we can take it away and redeploy it. The advantage of separating, we can have different scale. We can be ready for change. And I think that's very important to remember. None of these markets stand still. No market that has started on gas has ever stopped consuming gas as yet. Maybe that'll come with the renewables wave, but to date, no LNG market has gone backwards. And so we all need to fit into that evolution.
Cool. Thank you. I was going to ask a little bit about timing, but we actually seem to have hit on that a little bit. And I like, Parth, how you kind of covered how FSRUs can move quickly. Let me jump to a question on where things that go well. What are the practices that you have seen leading to successful projects, and then things that are to avoid? Now, I think the setup for this is that we have seen prospective new markets attempt tenders. Some separate the LNG terminal infrastructure from the power. Others have it all integrated. It seems like they struggle to conclude. They repeat a couple times over, creates frustration, credibility is lost, and there's still countless people out there who would benefit from gas, and there's perhaps no end in sight to them getting it. Parth, maybe you can start us with this. What are the best practices? Are there anything that, please try to avoid this?
Yeah, I think that's a very, very interesting question. It's pretty broad. But what we have seen, where we have seen projects being more successful, are where there is a vision and a very long-term planning. So it goes from all the way from doing a homework on what are the solutions available, what are the pluses, minuses, a techno-commercial assessment being done, a long-term planning on the downstream volumes, and even if not, but making some assessment. So we have seen the projects which are, let's call, have actually happened versus which failed or faltered at some point of time or got delayed. A lot of that is driven by the planning done by the team and the vision they have. What we have also seen is the sophistication of the approach that some of the sponsors take, which comes from obviously their understanding of availability, limitations of different solutions. But if you start comparing, say, a FSRU versus a FRU with a separate storage and so forth, so the question becomes, okay, how much of interface risk can be managed between different components, and how sophisticated is the team to take those responsibilities, and that flows into the bankability of the project. So the sponsors who have done early stage assessments, spoken to bankers, and because banks are effectively writing your put option as a sponsor. So they say, okay, I'll take 5% interest, but I'm underwriting 80% of the capital investment. So in a way, banks go into very deep analysis. And then from the risk assessment perspective, what they can or cannot accept, which if the sponsors have seen early stage, we have seen that various technical solutions have not really been ticked off from that perspective, where there is a lot of interface risk or project on project risk or How do you have performance warranties or FM events? How do they flow through different components? So a very good grasp of that is very crucial. And above all, being realistic about what market can deliver. So for example, we have seen some projects where it was left open. Okay, LNG suppliers, I need gas molecules and come up with your technical solutions. And then they turn around to the industry and say, okay, give me a solution. And it can be, I need, as you said earlier on, 500 megawatt. I need to send out 0.5 million ton for next 10 years, or rather 5 years, give me a solution. And then you're like struggling. So being realistic about what market can provide under what time frames and what are the practical limitations is very key.
Good. So it sounds like long-term planning underwrites with a vision to also the long-term bankability of it, kind of underwrites all the steps in between. Rolly, you're in markets where they're complex. Is there enough appreciation for that when they're developing tenders or developing their methods for bringing in infrastructure and LNG, especially the smaller ones? Where do you see? You comment on that?
Yeah, I think, well, we've had success going back now 10 years or so. We had success originally by helping put a price onto an area which was difficult to price and risk manage. And sadly, the project I referred to didn't get to fruition, but the point at that moment was, if you can price for me the process of sourcing, delivering gas, I can price the gas, I can price the power, so we would have a project. And very simply, at the time, the utility was arguing, anyone who brings this price to us, we would like to push ahead with a gas project. So there was no tender. It was a very simple metric around which to have a discussion. And there was, on the side of the utility, already an acceptance that they didn't want to get too involved in fighting over the last dime economics, so long as their project worked. Now, obviously, when you come, what the topic is, how to get these projects to happen, I think you need this clarity of vision. And I'm not sure that the processes which go into, say, the tendering market for a new project bring that clarity. I think often we separate out different components, we put them to tender to try and make sure the process is transparent, which is entirely legitimate, and cost efficient. But we lose sight of the inefficiencies of these tenders and the inability of these tenders to coordinate different components. Now, looking at a market, let's say, a market like Brazil, there has been a very high level and a very active tendering, but it's tendering to a price. So it's unitizing a lot of processes to a single price. And at the price, then the customer, being the utility or the power buyer, is getting both the LNG supply, the LNG infrastructure, the power lines, the pipeline, all these components are put into a price. And that's tendered. In a market where we're just trying to put together a piece of infrastructure, just the LNG component, and we don't have control of the power, and you don't have control of the LNG, the underlying commodity, I'm not sure that the tender process always gets to the best alternative, because it's difficult to agree at the outset what you actually want. And there's a bit of work to come up with a solution. So I guess I'm saying there's two ways the market evolves. One is where the value chain compresses and you have single operators taking more responsibility for the whole of the value chain away from a regulator or utility or a government. And I think that's proved successful. And the other is that where you don't compress the value chain, you do continue with a people bidding separate components, then I think you've got to be a bit more confident about how you go to that, and a bit more, I mean, to Parth's point, realistic about what the market will deliver, and maybe simplify the options to the market by making it purely a figure, and don't worry too much about whether that's the best possible price for that component part. More, can we get it done? Let's move on. There's no, I mean, what we see in our project in Ghana is a project where multiple tender processes or contract awards had occurred before we arrived. Frankly, it was a project to which I entered very reluctantly, concerned that the process would fall apart. But in the end, it's one where we have a government entirely committed to seeing gas sort of stabilize the economy. And in this case, a financial partner in Helios, who is entirely committed and aligned to making the project happen without having to wait for every single I to be dotted and T to cross on a project finance. And I mean, that is in no way unique. We've seen it with the IOCs around the world. You've seen it with with governments around the world, getting a project done by being very crystal clear about the priorities. Is, you know, that's a big part of the secret.
So sounds commitment and alignment to cover through the intricacies and nuances of what it takes to bring energy to an emerging market that doesn't have the backbone of sophisticated power and gas systems. Perhaps, as you're suggesting, focusing too much on an imperfect tender process is maybe better at delaying things than getting energy into the country.
Interestingly, you mentioned at the beginning that questioning what world time is playing. And we talk about onshore, floating being quicker and onshore being too slow. And I'm a little suspicious of that as a metric. I know, for example, we looked to build an LNG terminal onshore in Cyprus in 2005, and we're told that 3 years was too long for LNG to arrive in Cyprus. Now, LNG has yet to arrive in Cyprus. It will arrive via a floating terminal now, but you know, that's not because onshore takes too long to build. It's because the alignment wasn't there at the start, and the processes by which they procured it weren't in place.
I think there's a whole conversation that can be had about being realistic about things. And I was hoping to go there, but I don't think we're going to have enough time. I think we only have a couple of minutes left. I encourage folks to test out the poll. It's 50-50, so it just might have been like 2 of us that voted on it. I don't know. It was a try. What I'd like to is throw a question to Mr. Kim. So I find that the onshore terminal gets discounted very quickly with kind of coming off of Rolly's point about, oh, no, I need LNG in less than 3 years. And then it's been 2 decades and the LNG is still not there. The LNG, one of the nice things about the onshore terminal, can it benefit from local content? It may be more expensive than, let's say, an FSRU or an FRU system, but how much does that money stay in country? Do you have some experience on that?
I can't say how much is it exactly, but there's some benefits to onshore terminals to promote local economy. So around for example, we operate Mexico Manzanillo terminal. So, and there the staff of 90% of staffs are local hired. We train them and they are working there. So, and also the same in construction stage also, from 80 to 90% of people are hired in local. So they work and consume money at the market. So number of peoples, the population increasing and consumes the monies, and so their economy getting better. So there is some government like to promote local economy. So there is on good things.
So so onshore terminals, a lot of the cost comes from the labor, civil works, large civil projects, a lot of groundwork, and the tanks, the foundations and the concrete work, the labor-intensive construction. So that is in your Manzanilla, Mexico example, a lot of local labor was involved in that.
Yes.
Is that are there any kind of metrics on that? Is it a 10% local labor, or is it a 50% local labor, or higher, lower? Any?
Yes, the local labors during the operation stage, there's about 90%.
90%.
Yes.
But during the construction phase, is it
almost same 80 to 90%? Some key personnel dispatched from Korea, but the laborers we have to hire in local.
Okay. That's very interesting. I think at that time that facility was built, you only had the Altamira tanks, so it's not like folks in Mexico knew how to build LNG terminals. So that's impressive. So that gets to be a very sophisticated calculation as to how the money stays in country. And so the sticker cost of an onshore terminal compared to one of the other options really requires a nuanced view if this is something that is of value. So I think we're around our 40-minute timeline. I think we're kind of wrapping up to the end here. How's my poll looking? Has anyone voted? Okay, so I'm looking at it here, and so the question again was best terminal concept: 500 megawatt base load, maybe a little seasonal. CCGT, no existing gas market, shallow water in the developed ports, so we're going to have to go a little offshore. Maybe up to 1 kilometer, undeveloped coastline. We see a lot of these around the world. This could be.
We don't see a lot of them happen. we see
bingo. We see a lot of interest. Not so many happening. There are some, and so there's light, and so, but it's 50% going with the standard dual-purpose FSRU. So, hey, that's and 40% with the converted FSRU. So I think there's been developments recently that show that to be a popular option. Oh, folks are piling in their votes. It's changing as we speak. Getting ready for the elections coming up. I know you're all very excited about that. So we'll and the FRU is getting some love too. So that's good. Everybody's getting some love. All right, gentlemen. So I want to thank you for joining us. I think we've hit today on the reality is that there's nuances, and there is not one size fits all. There's not one concept that fits all. I'm not sure you will all agree with that individually. You gotta push for your business, but I do hear like a greater appreciation from those developing on really what is needed for success. Long-term vision, understanding of the nuances, talking and really learning the value chain, perhaps not committing to a structured tender process so quickly so that those learnings can be free-flowing. Emerging markets don't benefit perhaps from a lot of folks with gas experience. So getting it from the potential infrastructure and suppliers, very key to that. So I thank you again for joining us, and I think and thank you all for joining us here, and Petroleum Economists for hosting. It's been a great session. Look forward to listening to more of the presentations today. So,
thanks very much indeed.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you. Alex.
Yes.